A single spark in an endless darkness created everything. Fire blazes at the heart of our oldest stories, from the Norse giants born of flame to the Hindu universe kindled by a god's breath. Why does this one element ignite our origin myths again and again? By the end of this journey, you will understand the deep, universal connection between fire and the birth of worlds. We will uncover why a destructive force is so often the source of life, and how ancient rituals used flames to reenact the moment of creation. What does our primal fascination with fire reveal about how we see ourselves? Gather around that ancient campfire beneath a sky dense with stars. You can almost feel its warmth pushing back the chill of the night. Hear the soft crackle of burning wood. See the faces of the first storytellers illuminated in the dancing light. This was the first tool we truly mastered, and it did more than just cook our food or keep predators at bay. It transformed us. It gave us a space to become a community, to share not just warmth, but the very stories that would become the bedrock of civilizations. So it is no surprise that when these early people looked into the flames and asked where it all began, the answer often started with a spark. Fire became the universal catalyst in our myths because we experienced its creative power every single night. Anthropologists like Mircea Eliade observed that fire rituals across the globe are often a form of cosmogony, a reenactment of the universe's birth. The lighting of a sacred flame was not just a ceremony, it was a way to participate in that primordial moment, to connect the human world with the divine. The logic is deeply tangible. Fire takes the raw and makes it refined. It turns cold meat into nourishing food, dark night into productive day, and shapeless wood into light and heat. This process of transformation, of bringing order from chaos, perfectly mirrored the greatest story of all, the story of creation itself. From the formless void of pre-existence, a divine spark ignites, imposing structure, warmth, and life. What does this tell us about our own self-perception? We see our own burgeoning ingenuity, our ability to control and shape our world, reflected in the very element that allowed us to do so. We did not just use fire, we saw a part of ourselves within it, a primal collaborator in the great work of building a world worth living in. This foundational belief that creation is an act of transformative fire sets the stage for the incredible diversity of myths that followed. The Norse world was forged in a violent, beautiful clash of extremes. From the south came Muspelheim, a realm of pure, untamed fire, its landscapes eternally ablaze. And from the north swept Niflheim, a world of mist, ice, and bitter cold. In that great, empty void between them, the first warmth met the first frost. Fiery sparks from Muspelheim kissed the freezing vapors of Niflheim, and from that elemental reaction, life stirred. The droplets formed the primordial giant Ymir, and from his body, the earth itself was sculpted. But this was not a gentle beginning, it was a confrontation. At the border of this fiery realm stands Surtur, a giant wielding a sword brighter than the sun. He is not just a resident of the flames, he is their sentient will, a co-architect of reality. This myth frames fire as an active, masculine force, a necessary power to combat the stagnation of eternal ice. It is an element of immense agency, one that both builds and unmakes. This dual role is absolutely central. The same Surtur who helped birth the world is prophesied to lead the charge at Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, where he will engulf the 9 worlds in his flames, clearing the slate for a new cycle to begin. This is fire as the ultimate agent of destruction and rebirth, a concept the Norse would have seen mirrored in their own volatile world. Imagine living in ancient Scandinavia, where the threat of a long, dark winter was as real as the life-giving warmth of a hearth. Survival was a constant battle between heat and cold. The volcano that could bury a village in ash also enriched the soil for future generations. The forest fire that raised the land also allowed for new growth. The Norse did not just observe these cycles, they wove them into the very fabric of their cosmos, personifying the chaos to make it part of a grand, understandable story. Fire was not a mere tool, it was a dynamic, sometimes fearsome partner in the ongoing work of existence. While the Norse saw fire as a cosmic combatant, other traditions perceived it as a sacred intermediary. In the ancient Vedic rituals of India, the fire altar was the very center of the universe. A priest would make an offering of clarified butter, and as it vanished into flame and smoke, something miraculous occurred. The physical substance was transformed, carried upward on a column of heat to nourish the gods. This was the work of Agni, the divine personification of fire, one of the most revered deities in the Hindu pantheon. He is called the mouth of the gods, the vital conduit through which communication and sustenance flow between our world and the realm of the divine. But Agni's role is far grander than just a messenger. In the earliest hymns of the Rigveda, he is celebrated as the vital force that first kindled the cosmos into being. Here, fire is not merely a destructive or warming force, it is the fundamental agent of sacred transformation. It purifies, it illuminates, and it connects. This spiritual dimension is captured in a powerful concept, tapas. The word literally means heat, but it refers to the intense inner fire generated through meditation and austerities. Ancient sages were believed to sit in profound concentration, generating so much of this spiritual energy that they could influence the universe itself, their inner tapas echoing the primordial fire of creation. This idea is strikingly parallel to modern scientific concepts of the Big Bang, where an unimaginable concentration of energy and heat suddenly expanded to form everything we know. Why would a culture so deeply intertwine fire with enlightenment? Because they observed its properties every day. Fire transforms the raw into the cooked, the impure into the pure, and darkness into light. It logically became the perfect symbol for the ultimate transformation, the journey from ignorance to knowledge, from a state of spiritual chaos to one of cosmic order. Fire bridges the gap between the earthly and the eternal, a theme that echoes across the world's creation stories. But this gift of divine fire came with a terrible price. For his transgression, Zeus ordered Prometheus chained to a rock, where an eagle would feast on his liver for eternity, an organ that would regrow each day only to be devoured again. This eternal torment underscores a profound and unsettling truth within the myth. The power to create, to progress, is never free. It is wrested from the cosmos at a great cost, and its use carries immense responsibility. The fire that gave humanity civilization also introduced the potential for hubris, for overreaching pride that could invite divine retribution. This framing of fire as a double-edged sword speaks directly to ancient anxieties about the very nature of innovation. Every leap forward, from the first forged metal to the philosophies of Plato, carried with it a shadow of uncertainty. Was this new knowledge a blessing or a curse? Was Prometheus a noble benefactor or a tragic fool who unleashed forces humanity was not prepared to control? Plato himself wrestled with this duality, questioning whether the gift of technology truly led to a better life or simply new and more complicated forms of suffering. This is not an ancient concern alone. It is a struggle that defines our modern world. Every major technological revolution, from the industrial age to the dawn of artificial intelligence, mirrors the Promethean dilemma. We are granted immense power, the ability to reshape our world and even ourselves, but we are simultaneously burdened with the ethical weight of that power. Will our creations elevate us, or will they, like the eagle, return to consume us? the Greek myth does not offer easy answers. Instead, it presents fire as the ultimate stolen gift, a symbol of human potential that is inseparable from its capacity for chaos. It forces us to ask not just what we can do, but what we should do. This deep-seated tension between creation and consequence, between enlightenment and punishment, reveals a fundamental aspect of our identity. We are the children of that stolen flame, forever navigating its brilliant, dangerous light. The Promethean fire came with a price, but in the ancient landscapes of Australia, fire was not stolen, it was gifted as a responsibility. For countless generations, Aboriginal cultures have spoken of the Dreamtime, a timeless dimension where ancestral beings traveled the land, singing it into existence. In many of these powerful narratives, fire first came to humanity through figures like the eaglehawk or the lizard man, who carried a simple but profound tool, the fire stick. With it, they deliberately set the landscape ablaze. This was not an act of wanton destruction. It was the first controlled burn, an intentional act of creation that cleared away the old, choked undergrowth and prompted the germination of new plants, fostering a breathtaking biodiversity. Here, fire is framed not as a rebel's prize or a destructive force, but as an essential instrument of ecological balance and cultural continuity. This myth encodes a deep, practical wisdom. For over 60,000 years, Indigenous Australians have used cool, slow-burning fires to manage the terrain, a practice now validated by modern ethnobotanists. These controlled burns reduce the fuel for catastrophic wildfires, recycle nutrients into the soil, and encourage the growth of specific food plants. The myth and the practice are inseparable. The story of the ancestral being with the fire stick is not just a tale of the past, it is a continuous instruction manual for living in harmony with a fiery land. This stands in stark contrast to many Western narratives that position humanity against a wild, untamed nature. In the Aboriginal worldview, culture and nature are not separate realms. Creation is not a single event that happened long ago. It is an ongoing process in which people actively participate. By carrying out these traditional burns, they are quite literally continuing the work of the dreaming ancestors, singing the land back to health with fire. So what does this teach us about fire's true nature? It reveals a perspective where fire is fundamentally life-giving, a necessary rhythm in the heartbeat of the world itself. This is not fire as a weapon of conquest or a symbol of punishment, but fire as a partner in a perpetual, sacred dance of renewal. That cycle of renewal through partnership finds a terrifying echo in the temples of ancient Mesoamerica. High on a pyramid, a priest holds a still beating heart aloft before casting it into the sacred flame. This gruesome act was not mere brutality. It was a profound cosmological necessity, a desperate attempt to repay a primordial debt. The Aztec universe was born from a similar, ultimate sacrifice. According to their legends, we live in the era of the fifth sun, preceded by 4 previous worlds that were each destroyed. To set this current age in motion, the gods gathered at Teotihuacan in a time of darkness. The proud and wealthy god Tecusistecatl was chosen to leap into a massive, divine bonfire to become the new sun, but he hesitated at the brink, terrified by the heat. Then the humble and diseased god Nanahuatzin, covered in sores, gathered his courage and threw himself fearlessly into the blaze. Shamed by this act of courage, Tecusistecatl followed. From their sacrifice, the sun and moon rose into the sky, setting the cosmos in motion. Here, fire is not a tool or a partner, but a transformative crucible. It is the very substance of sacrifice, the medium through which life is exchanged for cosmic order. The world itself was literally forged from the self-immolation of a god. This established a terrifying precedent for all of existence. The sun, a massive ball of fire, required the sustenance of sacred energy, the life force the Aztecs called tonali, to continue its journey across the sky. Without regular offerings of blood, the sun would die, plunging the world into permanent darkness. This belief fueled the ritual heart sacrifices that seem so alien to us today. Every death on the altar was a reenactment of Nanahuatsin's leap, a small payment to feed the great celestial fire and stave off the end of the world. The magnificent Aztec calendar stone is not just a timekeeping device, it is a map of this cosmic philosophy. At its center is the face of the sun god Tonatiuh, his tongue a ritual flint knife demanding sustenance. The four squares surrounding him depict the four previous suns, each destroyed by elemental forces like jaguars, wind, and rain of fire. This is a universe governed by cyclical destruction and rebirth, with fire serving as the primary agent of both end and beginning. Why would creation demand such violence? The Mesoamerican answer lies in the very landscape they inhabited. Volcanic peaks like Popocatépetl regularly painted the sky with ash and fire. An eruption was not a random disaster, it was a visible, terrifying performance of the god's power, a literal remaking of the earth. The world was not built once and left to run. It was a fragile, ongoing project that required constant human participation to maintain. This worldview challenges our linear notion of a single, distant creation event. Instead, it proposes that creation is an eternal flame that must be continually fed, a cycle where the end is always, inevitably, the beginning. The leap from a temple altar to the human mind is not as far as it might seem. Carl Jung, the pioneering psychologist, proposed that certain symbols are hardwired into our species, buried deep in what he called the collective unconscious. Among the most potent of these universal archetypes is fire. For Jung, this divine spark represented the raw energy of the psyche itself, our libido, our passions, and our fundamental drive toward consciousness and self-awareness. This is not just a poetic idea, it is a psychological reality that begins in childhood. Watch any toddler captivated by the dancing flames in a fireplace. There is no cultural instruction needed for that mesmerized stare, that mix of caution and irresistible pull. Developmental psychologists see this as a primal template, a perfect mirror of our relationship with the vast unknown, a blend of fear and fascination that is fundamental to the human experience. This deep-seated wiring is activated every time we sit around a campfire. The flickering light against a wall of darkness does something profound to our ancient brain. It triggers a primal response that screams safety, community, and shared narrative. In that circle of warmth, predators are kept at bay, the cold is held back, and faces are illuminated for conversation. This was the very cradle of storytelling, a setting where the first myths were inevitably forged. Cognitive scientists suggest that fire's inherent unpredictability made it the perfect metaphor for life's greatest mysteries. Its flames are alive, they dance, consume, and transform, yet they can never be truly grasped or owned. For ancient peoples, this made fire the ideal vessel to personify the natural forces they could observe but never control, from the fury of a lightning strike to the life-giving power of the sun. Why does this innate psychological attraction to flame persist so powerfully in our modern dreams and art? A dream of a comforting hearthfire speaks to a very different psychological need than a nightmare of a raging inferno. Artists across centuries and cultures are drawn to its light, using it to symbolize everything from divine inspiration and creative passion to destructive rage and purification. This is not a coincidence. It reveals that our fire myths are far more than simple stories invented to explain the world. They are profound reflections of our deepest cognitive processes. The way our minds work, the way we are drawn to light, compelled by transformation, and terrified by chaos, is all projected onto this single, mesmerizing element. Our oldest stories about the birth of the world are, in the end, stories about the birth of our own awareness. a universal narrative forged in the primal theater of the human mind. The primordial fire of myth finds a stunning echo in our most advanced scientific understanding of the cosmos. The Big Bang Theory describes a universe born not in a gentle unfolding, but from a titanic release of energy, a singularity of unimaginable heat and density. For the briefest moments, all of existence was a seething, brilliant fireball, a cosmic forge from which every star, planet, and eventual life would be forged. Astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson often highlights this profound parallel, noting how both ancient myth and modern cosmology point to a hot, dense state as the fundamental starting point. From the formless chaos of the Norse Jungian to the featureless singularity before the Big Bang, the narrative is the same, a universe kindled into being by an immense and transformative heat. This is not a coincidence, it is a reflection of a deep, observable truth about how order emerges from disorder, a process that requires energy and often fire. On the scale of human experience, we see this principle in the simple chemistry of a campfire. The process of combustion requires a perfect trinity: fuel, oxygen, and heat, a self-sustaining reaction that perfectly mirrors the divine triads found in countless creation stories. This fundamental triad is the engine of transformation, taking one state of matter and turning it into another, releasing light and warmth in the process. Our own biological history is inextricably tied to this engine. The discovery of how to control fire, a feat achieved by our ancestor Homo erectus over 1 million years ago, was arguably the most important technological leap we ever made. It did more than provide warmth and safety. Cooking food with fire broke down tough fibers and toxins, making more calories and nutrients available. This efficient energy source is believed to have directly fueled the massive expansion of the human brain, allowing for complex thought, language, and the very social structures that gave rise to storytelling around those same flames. So why does this convergence exist? Why do both our oldest intuitions and our newest instruments point to heat as the fundamental creative force? The answer may lie in the undeniable physical reality of fire itself. Its properties are inherently narrative. It is a process of profound change, a bringer of light to darkness, and a source of energy that must be fed to survive. Whether we are looking at the birth of a star or the birth of a myth, we are witnessing the same universal story, told through the one element that perfectly embodies the drama of creation. This symbolic power of fire extends far beyond the moment of origin, shaping our deepest ideas about knowledge, spirit, and the very soul. That same fire which forged the cosmos also holds the power to cleanse it. You can see this truth written in the landscape of a forest after a wildfire. At first glance, the ground is a canvas of ash and charcoal, a scene of absolute desolation. But look closer, within that nutrient-rich soil, seeds that have lain dormant for years, seeds that require the intense heat of flames to crack open their shells, begin to sprout. Life surges back, more vibrant and diverse than before. Ancient observers saw this cycle of destruction and regrowth and wove it directly into their understanding of the divine. Fire was not merely a destroyer, it was the world's great purifier, burning away decay and disease to create a blank slate for rebirth. This concept of purification through flame is a cornerstone of Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest continuously practiced religions. At its heart is Atta, the sacred fire, understood to be the visible presence of the divine wisdom of Ahura Mazda. This is not a fire to be feared, but a cosmic force that actively battles evil, darkness, and falsehood. In Zoroastrian temples, an eternal flame is kept burning, a focus for prayer and a constant reminder of this ongoing struggle between order and chaos. A similar, though distinct, philosophy illuminates Japanese Shinto traditions. Here, ritual fires are central to ceremonies of purification. Impurities, known as keger, which can accumulate through contact with death, disease, or even simple misfortune, are seen as a kind of spiritual stain that disrupts the harmony of the community and the natural world. By leaping over a carefully prepared fire or walking across hot embers in a ritual called Hiwatari, participants believe these impurities are literally burned away, restoring balance and purity. This symbolism is so powerful it echoes in one of the most enduring myths of all, the story of the phoenix. This magnificent bird, at the end of its long life, builds a nest of aromatic spices, ignites it, and is consumed by the flames. Yet from its own ashes it rises again, renewed and rejuvenated. The phoenix is the ultimate symbol of this cycle, a perfect metaphor for how destruction is often the necessary prelude to a new beginning. Historians point to moments of profound crisis, like the plagues that swept through medieval Europe, as triggers for widespread fire rituals. Communities, feeling besieged by invisible forces of death and decay, would light great bonfires in an attempt to burn away the misfortune itself, to ritually cleanse their world and grant themselves a fresh start. How does this ancient link between fire and purity persist today? We see it in the quiet solemnity of a candlelight vigil, where individual flames represent hope, memory, and a collective desire to overcome darkness. We see it in the roaring bonfires of New Year's celebrations, where leaping over the flames or simply watching the old year burn away is an act of symbolic purification, a burning off of the past year's regrets to make way for new possibilities. This enduring symbolism reveals a profound human truth. We are drawn to fire not just for its warmth or its power, but for its ability to represent our deepest yearning for transformation. It is a metaphor for our own capacity to burn away what no longer serves us, to emerge from our own trials refined, purified, and ready to begin again. That same purifying fire also illuminates the path to knowledge. A single candle flame in a vast, dark library does more than just allow you to read. It becomes a perfect picture of a sudden insight, the spark of genius that cuts through the fog of confusion. This link between fire and enlightenment is ancient and profound. In the Hebrew Bible, the divine chose to speak to Moses not through a whirlwind or an earthquake, but from the heart of a bush that was aflame yet not consumed. The fire was the medium of revelation, a visible sign of a truth so powerful it could not be destroyed. Centuries later, the Buddha delivered his famous fire sermon, instructing his followers that all of the senses, the entire world of experience, are burning with the fires of passion, aversion, and delusion. The path to liberation was to become dispassionate, to let these inner fires go out and achieve the cool, peaceful state of nirvana. Here, fire represents both the problem of worldly attachment and the transformative process of overcoming it. The quest for this inner transformation found a powerful symbol in the work of the alchemists. In their secretive laboratories, they tended their furnaces, believing fire to be the great worker, the essential agent that could transmute a base metal like lead into spiritualized gold. This was never just about chemistry. The entire process was a grand metaphor for the soul's own journey. The base metal was the unenlightened, imperfect self. The heat of the furnace represented the trials, sufferings, and intense self-discipline required for spiritual growth. The final goal was the philosopher's stone, a symbol of the perfected, enlightened consciousness. This is why the most powerful educational philosophies speak not of filling a bucket, but of lighting a fire. True learning is not the passive reception of facts. It is an active, energetic process of internal transformation, where old ideas are burned away and new, more brilliant understandings take their place. Why does this metaphor of intellectual fire resonate so deeply across cultures and eras? Because an idea, like a flame, has a life of its own. It can spread rapidly, it can ignite passion, it can provide warmth and guidance, and it can consume outdated ways of thinking. The pursuit of knowledge is at its heart a quest to bring light into darkness. It is the same fundamental human impulse that once stared into a campfire and saw not just safety from the night, but the very birth of the world. This inner flame of curiosity and understanding is our own personal creation myth, a continuous spark that drives us to innovate, to discover, and to forever seek the meaning behind the stars. Yet this same fire that enlightens the mind can also consume everything in its path. A volcanic eruption tears open the earth, spewing ash that blots out the sun and rivers of fire that incinerate entire landscapes. For the ancient Greeks, this was the work of Hephaestus, the god of the forge, whose hammers struck not only to create magnificent armor, but also to unleash volcanic fury. In Hawaii, the goddess Pele embodies this same terrifying duality, both creating the islands with her fiery touch and destroying them with her volatile temper. These myths do not shy away from the raw, annihilating power of flames. They personify it, giving a face to the chaos that can descend without warning. This destructive aspect is not an aberration in the story of creation. It is often a necessary prelude. The Norse Ragnarok is a cosmic conflagration where Surtur's fire engulfs the world, reducing the great tree Yggdrasil to ashes and drowning the earth in a boiling sea. Only after this total purification can the world rise again, green and fertile from the waves. Similarly, the biblical account of Sodom and Gomorrah sees fire and brimstone rain from the heavens, a divine reset that erases moral corruption from the land. In these narratives, fire is the ultimate agent of dissolution, dismantling old, stagnant orders to make way for something new. This mirrors a principle in modern chaos theory, where complex systems must sometimes break down completely to reorganize themselves into more resilient, higher-order states. A forest choked with dead wood cannot support new life until a wildfire clears the way. The destruction is not an end, but a violent, necessary phase in a larger cycle of renewal. Psychologically, this uncontrollable force taps into our most primal fears of annihilation. The sight of a spreading wildfire or a lava flow triggers a deep-seated anxiety about the fragility of our own civilization, our homes, and our very lives. Myths gave this fear a name and a story, allowing people to rationalize the terrifying randomness of natural disasters. They answered the question of why a seemingly benevolent universe would allow such suffering by framing it as part of a grand, if painful, cosmic process. How did ancient cultures hold these two opposing ideas of fire in balance? They understood that creation and destruction are two sides of the same burning coin. You cannot have the warmth of the hearth without the risk of the house fire. You cannot have the transformative power of the forge without the potential for a devastating blaze. By acknowledging this essential duality, myths provided a framework for enduring catastrophe. They offered a profound, if challenging, hope, suggesting that from the ashes of the old world, a new one must inevitably be born. Deep within a Neolithic circle of stones, a shaman carefully feeds a sacred fire. The community watches as the flames leap higher, their light flickering against ancient carvings. In this moment, the fire is more than warmth, it is a conduit. The shaman's chants rise with the smoke, a bridge of energy connecting the living to the ancestors, a plea for fertility bestowed upon the coming harvest. This scene played out for millennia, and we have the stones to prove it. At sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, archaeologists have uncovered carefully constructed fire pits dating back 12,000 years. These were not for cooking but for ceremony, marking fire's role as one of humanity's first spiritual technologies. It was a tool to reach beyond the visible world. This impulse to ritualize fire became the bedrock of entire civilizations. In ancient India, the Vedic yajna ceremony was a precise science. A priest would make offerings of clarified butter and sacred herbs into a fire altar, chanting specific hymns. The belief was that this act maintained Rita, the cosmic order itself. If the ritual was performed perfectly, the universe would remain in harmony, the sun would rise, and the seasons would turn. A mistake could bring chaos. Meanwhile, in Rome, the fate of the state was tied to a single, eternal flame. Tended by the Vestal Virgins in the Temple of Vesta, this fire's continuous burn symbolized the enduring life and security of Rome. Should it ever go out, it was seen as a catastrophic omen, a sign that the gods had withdrawn their protection. Why did cultures across the globe feel such a powerful need to institutionalize fire in this way? These rituals fulfilled a deep psychological need for connection and control. By reenacting the primordial moment of creation with controlled flames, people were not just remembering a myth, they were participating in it. They were symbolically using fire to birth a new season, to inaugurate a new leader, or to purify a new community. Every sacred flame was a living bridge, a tangible thread linking the human realm to the divine. This repeated ceremonial practice did more than just honor fire. It cemented its status as the ultimate active partner in the ongoing work of existence, transforming abstract belief into a daily, breathing reality. A map of the ancient world lights up with the same story. In the forests of the Cherokee, Grandmother Spider, a tiny, clever being, weaves a basket to steal a single ember from the Sun People, bringing fire's warmth to a shivering world. Far across the ocean, the Polynesian demigod Maui, a master trickster, fashions ropes from his sister's hair to snare the sun itself, forcing it to slow its frantic journey across the sky and give humanity more hours of light and warmth. Separated by vast, impassable oceans, these cultures never met, yet they told nearly identical stories. The fire of creation is almost never just found. It is a treasure that must be stolen, a prize won by a clever animal or a cunning trickster figure who outsmarts the gods. Why would this specific plot repeat itself across the entire globe? The scholar Joseph Campbell saw these parallels not as evidence of some lost civilization, but as proof of a collective human psyche. We all face the same primal realities, the terror of the dark, the desperate need for warmth, and the looming shadow of our own mortality. Fire was the one element that physically and symbolically addressed all these fears at once. It pushed back the night, it cooked our food to stave off starvation, and its flickering life against the darkness became a powerful metaphor for our own fragile existence. These myths were our first science attempting to explain the world around us. The Cherokee story of a stolen ember is a poetic explanation for the origin of lightning, a piece of the sun's fire falling to earth. The Maori tale of Maui capturing the sun is a narrative about the invention of agriculture, about gaining enough daylight to tend crops and build a more stable society. Every time a culture mastered a new aspect of fire, from cooking to metalworking, the myth evolved to explain that technological leap, weaving our growing control over the world into the very fabric of our oldest stories. This global convergence points to something fundamental about who we are. Our shared fascination with fire is a foundational archetype, a story written into our bones long before we built cities or wrote histories. It reveals a universal human impulse to find meaning, to explain our place in the cosmos, and to celebrate the rebellious, ingenious spark that allowed us to shape our own destiny. Gaze upward at the sun, the ultimate cosmic fire. Its daily journey across the sky was the most reliable drama our ancestors ever witnessed, a perpetual cycle of birth and death played out in brilliant light and terrifying darkness. It is no wonder that solar deities stand at the center of so many creation stories. For the ancient Egyptians, the sun god Ra was the supreme creator. Each night, he would sail his solar bark through the treacherous, watery underworld, battling the serpent of chaos, Apep, to be reborn at dawn. His victory was not just a story, It was the very event that recreated the world each and every morning, imposing order over the void. This was not passive observation, it was an active, participatory belief. The entire Egyptian state ritual was designed to aid Ra in his eternal struggle, ensuring the sun would rise and the cosmos would not collapse back into nothingness. Similarly, for the Inca, the sun god Inti was the direct ancestor of the emperor and the giver of life to the Andes. His warmth made the crops grow, and his light defined the sacred cycles of time. These myths transformed the sun from a distant ball of plasma into a conscious, willful agent of creation, a celestial fire with a purpose. This purpose was often tied to precise astronomical events. The Egyptians meticulously tracked the star Sirius, whose heliacal rising, its first appearance in the dawn sky after a period of invisibility, coincided perfectly with the annual flooding of the Nile. This celestial signal heralded the inundation that would deposit rich, life-giving silt across the farmlands. In their understanding, the fire of this star was directly linked to the fertility of the earth, a cosmic trigger for renewal. The myth and the astronomy were a single, unified system of knowledge. How did these early sky watchers integrate such events into their fire-centric tales? They saw a universe of interconnected relationships, the spark of a new star on the horizon, the predictable path of the sun, the sudden flash of a meteorite. All of these were expressions of a living, fiery cosmos. They were not merely telling stories about the sky, they were reading the sky as a continuous creation narrative written in flame. This celestial connection elevates fire from a simple earthly tool to a universal, ordering principle. The astrophysicist Carl Sagan famously noted that we are all made of star stuff. The iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, the oxygen you breathe, all were forged in the nuclear furnaces of long-dead stars. What is a star but a continuous titanic fire, a nuclear fusion reactor on an unimaginable scale? Modern science confirms what the myth-makers intuited, that fire is the cosmic craftsman. The same transformative process that turns wood into heat and light in your hearth is the process that built the very elements of life itself in the hearts of stars. The sun above is not a metaphor for fire, it is the source and summit of every flame we have ever known, a perpetual reminder that creation is an ongoing, fiery act. This inner fire of the spirit burned at the heart of the alchemist's secret art. Within a dim, medieval laboratory, the only constant was the low, persistent roar of the Athena furnace, its flames meticulously controlled to maintain the perfect heat for the great work. The alchemist was not merely a primitive chemist, he was a mystic, and his true goal was the creation of the philosopher's stone, a substance that could transmute base metals into gold and grant eternal life. But this entire process was a grand allegory for the soul's journey. The lead in his crucible represented the unenlightened self, burdened by ignorance and base desires. The fire of the furnace was the very engine of spiritual transformation, the ignis in naturalis or unnatural fire that burned away these impurities. This was not a physical flame you could cook with, it was a divine, purging energy aimed at the spirit. The ancient text known as the Emerald Tablet lays out this parallel in cryptic terms, stating, "As above, so below." It describes the entire cosmos being created through a series of alchemical operations, each one a stage of fiery refinement. The first stage, calcination, involved burning the raw material to a fine white ash, symbolizing the destruction of the ego and the burning away of illusion. Next came dissolution, where the ash was dissolved in liquid, representing the purification of the emotions. Finally, coagulation saw the purified substance reformed into a new, perfected whole, the golden consciousness of an enlightened being. This same principle of an ascending spiritual fire appears half a world away in tantric traditions, where the concept of kundalini describes a serpent of latent psychic energy coiled at the base of the spine. Through meditation and discipline, this inner fire is awakened, rising like a flame up the central channel of the body, piercing each energy center or chakra until it reaches the crown of the head, resulting in a state of supreme consciousness and unity with the divine. Why would mystics from such different cultures all equate spiritual awakening with a literal internal fire? Because the process perfectly mirrors the cosmic creation myths. Just as a universe is born from a primordial fireball, expanding from a single point of infinite potential into a complex cosmos, the individual consciousness is seen as a microcosm of that same event. The inner fire of Kundalini, or the alchemist's furnace, is the personal Big Bang, the explosive moment of insight that shatters old ways of thinking and forges a new, more expansive reality within the self. The quest for the philosopher's stone was never really about material wealth. It was about achieving that golden, immutable state of being, where the soul, refined by its own sacred fire, becomes a perfect mirror of the universe itself. A candle flame does not hold a single, rigid shape. It dances, it flickers, it reaches upward, constantly consuming fuel to sustain its own delicate light. This is a near-perfect picture of the human mind itself, a dynamic and restless system of thoughts and awareness. The French philosopher Gaston Bachelard dedicated an entire book to this very idea, exploring the psychoanalysis of fire. He saw in the flame a profound symbol of human desire and our fundamental will to know, a deep-seated curiosity that drives us to question everything around us. This inner fire of inquiry is precisely what our oldest myths are trying to capture when they place a spark at the beginning of everything. Fire, in these stories, is not just a tool for survival, it becomes the very spark of self-awareness. It is the moment a primal being first looks at its own hands illuminated by the campfire and asks, "Who am I?" This awakening is what separates us in the stories, granting us the gifts of complex language, shared culture, and a moral compass. It is the birth of the inner world. Modern neuroscience offers a startlingly literal parallel to this ancient intuition. Your brain is an incredibly energy-intensive organ, a biological furnace that consumes a massive amount of your body's fuel. Its network of neurons fires in cascading, unpredictable patterns, a storm of electrochemical activity that generates not just thought, but actual physical heat. This dynamic information processing system shares key properties with a flame, both being open systems far from equilibrium, constantly transforming energy into something more complex. So why does this metaphorical link matter? It suggests that the very act of creating a myth, of telling a story about where we came from, is itself a fiery process. Just as a flame illuminates a dark room, a myth illuminates a mysterious universe. Our consciousness, that inner flame, projects its own nature onto the cosmos, imagining a creation born from an element that behaves exactly as we do, consuming, transforming, and reaching always for the light. We did not just tell stories about fire, we used fire to tell the story of ourselves. A landscape of fire literally writes its own mythology. Where the earth itself cracks open to spew molten rock, the people living there have no choice but to see creation as a violent, fiery act. In Iceland, a land straddling the mid-Atlantic ridge, the ground steams and the volcanoes sleep fitfully. It is a living portrait of the Norse myth of Muspelheim, that realm of primordial fire whose sparks first met the ice of Niflheim. For an Icelander standing before the eruption of Fagradalsfjall, the story of Surtur wielding his flaming sword is not a fantasy, it is a daily geological reality. The myth was a direct response to the terrain, a way to personify the terrifying and beautiful forces that built the very ground beneath their feet. This pattern repeats across the globe. In Hawaii, the goddess Pele is the volcano. Her fiery temper creates new land as lava flows into the sea, and her jealousy can destroy entire forests. The myths did not invent her, the volcanoes did. geologists note a striking correlation that regions with active tectonics and frequent volcanic activity are far more likely to develop creation stories where fire is the primary architect. When early humans witnessed a mountain giving birth to itself in a torrent of liquid rock and ash, they were seeing what looked like the Earth's own painful, magnificent labor. They interpreted the eruption not as a random disaster, but as the visible, ongoing work of a world still being forged. This connection extends deep beneath the surface to the very fuels we now depend upon. The discovery of coal and oil revealed that the Earth had locked away vast reservoirs of ancient sunlight, the fossilized remains of prehistoric life. To burn coal is to release energy that has been buried for millions of years. This process reinforced the idea of a subterranean, primordial fire, a dormant creative power waiting to be unleashed. It transformed fire from a simple surface tool into a symbol of the planet's deep, hidden energies. Climate studies add another crucial layer to this story. For societies that survived the last ice age, fire was not a convenience. It was the thin, bright line between life and death. In a world locked in ice, the ability to create and maintain a flame meant warmth, cooked food, protection, and community. This absolute, non-negotiable dependence would have been seared into the collective memory, becoming a central pillar of the oral traditions passed from one shivering generation to the next around the hearth. So why do specific environments produce such distinct fire myths? A culture surrounded by ice will tell a story of fire conquering the cold. A people living on the slopes of a volcano will tell a story of a fiery god who both creates and destroys. The myth adapts to the most immediate, powerful environmental force, providing a narrative framework to explain the world as it is experienced. The imagination is not a separate realm. It is profoundly grounded in the dirt and rock and fire of a particular place, forever telling the story of the land that shaped it. The red pill in the Matrix offers a brutal awakening, a jolt of painful truth that shatters a comfortable illusion. This is precisely the same disruptive energy as Prometheus stealing fire from the gods. It is knowledge as a dangerous, world-altering flame. In our modern digital campfires, the cinema screen and the video game console, these ancient archetypes have found powerful new life. The fire-wreathed Leviathan axe in God of War is not just a weapon. It is a tool of both brutal annihilation and necessary forging, a direct descendant of the Norse Surtur who both built and unmade the world. These stories are not borrowing from mythology. They are continuing it, using the same symbolic language to explore the same timeless human struggles. Even in the wizarding world of Harry Potter, the magical flames are deeply traditional. The eternal flame of Gryffindor's sword, which appears only to a true member of the house, is a classic symbol of legacy and courage that cannot be extinguished. Fiend fire, by contrast, is a cursed fire that consumes everything in its path, a perfect metaphor for destructive rage run amok. This duality is exactly what the ancients understood, fire as both a sacred protector and an uncontrollable scourge. You can see this mythic power harnessed in the most secular of modern temples, the global marketplace. The Olympic torch relay is a corporate-sponsored event, yet its power is undiminished. That single flame, carried across continents, still symbolizes peace, unity, and the enduring human spirit. It is a ritual that would feel entirely familiar to a Vestal virgin tending her sacred hearth, a collective agreement that this particular fire means something more than just combustion. Why do these symbols feel so natural to us even now? Because the fundamental human concerns have not changed. We still wrestle with the Promethean dilemma of powerful new technologies, from artificial intelligence to genetic engineering. We still seek the purifying fire to cleanse our mistakes and the illuminating spark of a new idea. Our stories have simply migrated from oral tales around a hearth to digital streams on a screen, but the core narrative remains. The creative spark that first flickered in the eyes of ancient storytellers now ignites the pixels of a blockbuster film, ensuring the myth of fire will blaze for as long as we have new worlds to imagine. The voice from the burning bush did not command Moses to step back, but to remove his sandals, for the ground he stood on was made holy by a flame that burned without being consumed. This is the paradox at the heart of monotheistic fire, a presence that illuminates without destroying the vessel that contains it. In the Jewish tradition, this event established fire as the primary medium for a direct personal revelation from God, a sign that was awe-inspiring yet not annihilating. This theme of a guiding, revelatory flame continues powerfully in the Christian story of Pentecost, where tongues of fire descended upon the heads of the apostles, granting them the ability to speak in many languages. This was not a fire of punishment, but one of empowerment and unification, igniting the early church with a divine spirit that enabled it to spread its message across the known world. Similarly, in Islamic mysticism, the light of Allah is often described in terms of a sublime, spiritual fire, an illuminating presence that burns away the ego to reveal the soul's proximity to the divine. The Quran itself uses the imagery of a blessed olive tree, whose oil would almost glow even if no fire touched it, a metaphor for God's light as a self-sustaining, radiant truth. How do these faiths reconcile the same element that forged the golden calf into an idol with the fire that purified the prophet Isaiah's lips? The answer lies in intentionality. Fire becomes a divine tool when its power is directed by a sacred will for the purposes of revelation, communication, and purification. It is the difference between the destructive blaze of Sodom and the illuminating pillar of fire that guided the Israelites through the desert night. Even the creation narrative in Genesis, while not explicitly mentioning flame, begins with God's command, "Let there be light." This primal act of separating light from darkness is the foundational moment of order emerging from chaos, and light is the purest, most fundamental expression of fire's creative power. Theologians have long debated whether the burning bush was a literal, physical fire or a powerful vision, but they universally agree on its symbolic meaning, a transformative encounter that purifies the human soul for a higher calling. This fire does not merely warm the body, it ignites the spirit, bridging the immense gap between human frailty and eternal truth. It is a fire that demands a response, calling the believer to step onto holy ground and be changed forever. This division of fire reflects the world ancient societies knew. The male hero who ventures out to steal or master the elemental force mirrors the external, acquisitive roles assigned to men, a conquest over the natural world. The female entity who is the fire, who contains it as a stable hearth or a territorial volcano, mirrors the internal, sustaining roles of women, the keepers of the home and the heart of the community. The Greek Hestia, goddess of the hearth, was so central to domestic life that a portion of every sacrifice was first offered to her flames, yet she is a background figure in the great myths, her power rooted in a static, unwavering presence. The Hawaiian peel is the volcanic land itself, a creative and destructive force so deeply tied to the earth it is literally inseparable from it. Her power is immense, but it is territorial, not something she carries outward. This symbolic framework is not accidental. It served to reinforce a social order where active, world-changing power was a masculine domain, while life-giving, stabilizing power was a feminine one. Feminist scholars point out how these narratives, repeated across cultures, naturalized patriarchal structures, making them seem as inevitable as the rising sun. Yet fire itself is a rebellious element, and its mythology is full of telling cracks. The Cherokee grandmother spider is a profound exception, a distinctly feminine figure who uses her cleverness and skill, not brute force, to weave a container and steal fire for her people. Her story subverts the dominant paradigm, presenting intelligence and subtlety as the true tools of progress. So why does this gendering of fire persist? It reveals that our creation myths are less about literal origins and more about justifying and exploring our own social structures. The story of who controls the spark is ultimately a story about who holds authority, who is permitted to be an agent of change, and whose labor is valued as foundational. Fire's undeniable duality, however, constantly undermines these simple binaries. The same hearth fire that nurtures and cooks can burn down the home. The volcanic fire that creates new land also destroys everything in its path. This inherent complexity makes fire a deeply unstable symbol for rigid gender roles. It embodies both the masculine-coded act of destruction and the feminine-coded act of creation simultaneously, refusing to be neatly categorized. Perhaps these myths endured not because they perfectly captured reality, but because they gave people a language to wrestle with the most fundamental tensions in their own lives, between the need for daring conquest and the need for stable care, between the world builder and the world sustainer. The fire, in all its glorious contradiction, was the perfect character for that eternal drama. The very words we use for fire carry the embers of our oldest stories. Across the vast family of Indo-European languages, the names for this element share a deep ancestral root. The Latin ignis, source of words like ignite, and the Sanskrit agni, the name of the fire god, both trace back to a proto-word meaning to stir or to set in motion. This is not a coincidence. The first speakers did not simply name a static object, they described an action, a process of awakening. Fire was not a thing, it was an event, something that animated the world. This linguistic thread connects directly to our most fundamental concepts of life and spirit. The same root that gives us the word animal, meaning a living, moving being, is intimately tied to the ancient word for fire. In the minds of our ancestors, the spark that kindled a flame was the same essential force that stirred a creature to life. This connection is preserved in our everyday speech, long after the original meaning has faded from memory. We speak of a fiery temper, of being fired up with inspiration, or of a trial by fire. A heated argument can escalate into a firefight. We carry a fire in our belly for a passion or a cause. These are not just metaphors, they are fossilized fragments of a primal understanding, where the physical properties of flame were the only available vocabulary for describing the inner landscape of human experience. How does this happen? Language is a living museum of human thought. When a concept is so central to a culture that it shapes their entire worldview, it bleeds into the lexicon, creating a web of related meanings that endure for millennia. The word fire expands to encompass not just the burning log, but also the spark of genius, the warmth of affection, and the destructive power of rage. This lexical analysis reveals something profound. Fire is not just a physical phenomenon we learn to control. It is a fundamental cognitive category, a basic building block of how we think and communicate about the world. Our language itself is a testament to the mythic importance of the flame, proving that long before we wrote our stories down, we were weaving them into the very words we used to speak them into being. Those ancient ochre handprints on the cave walls of Lascaux are more than just signatures. They are the echoes of a primal gathering, where the flickering light of a tallow lamp would have brought the painted bison and aurochs to life, dancing alongside the shadows of the people who revered them. While we do not see literal flames painted in charcoal, the entire scene is bathed in the color of fire, a deep, earthy red made from iron oxide, the same elemental substance that gives embers their glow. This was not a gallery, it was a sacred space, and the art itself was a form of ritual, a story of creation and the hunt brought into being by the very element that made such storytelling possible. Centuries later, that same creative impulse blazed across the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. In Michelangelo's The Creation of Adam, the divine spark of life does not travel down a beam of solid light, but flows like a current of fiery energy from the fingertip of God to the languid hand of Adam. The billowing cloak surrounding the Creator and his angels is not just fabric, it is a visual representation of a cosmic fire, a swirling nebula of divine intellect and power igniting the soul of the first man. The artist chose this dynamic, almost explosive form to convey a force that was too immense, too alive, to be contained by simple lines. This symbolic use of fire is a universal language in art. In intricate Hindu mandalas, the god Agni is often visualized at the very center, a point of radiant focus from which the entire cosmos unfolds. His flames are not destructive, but generative, representing the sacred fire of sacrifice that sustains the universe. Similarly, on Native American pottery from the Southwest, spiraling flame motifs are not mere decoration. They are maps of cosmic cycles depicting the sun's journey, the turning of the seasons, and the perpetual dance of destruction and renewal. Iconographers point to fire's inherent visual properties as the reason for its enduring power. Its vibrant color immediately draws the human eye. Its constant, unpredictable movement suggests a life force that cannot be pinned down or fully understood. And its radiance, the way it pushes back darkness and casts a warm glow, is the perfect visual metaphor for enlightenment, revelation, and the emergence of order from chaos. In a static painting or a carved sculpture, fire is the one element that can convincingly represent dynamism and transcendence. Why do these images, from a French cave to an Italian chapel, still evoke such a visceral sense of awe? They tap directly into that deep-seated archetype in our collective psyche. We are not just looking at a picture of a flame, we are connecting with the primal story it tells, the story of our own beginning. This artistic legacy has done more than just illustrate myths. It has actively shaped our collective understanding of them. Long before most people could read the Epic of Gilgamesh or the Rig Veda, they saw stained glass windows depicting Pentecostal flames or Tibetan thankas illustrating the fires of meditation. These images translated complex philosophical ideas into an immediate, emotional experience, ensuring that the mythic power of fire remained vivid and accessible across generations. The story of creation for most of human history was not read in a book, but seen in the art that adorned temples, churches, and communal spaces, a brilliant and enduring proof that some truths are best understood not with the mind, but through the heart, illuminated by an eternal, symbolic flame. That pivotal moment when our ancestors first harnessed a flame marked a biological revolution. Archaeological evidence from sites like Wonderwork Cave in South Africa reveals that Homo erectus was using controlled fire around 1 million years ago. This was not a single discovery, but a slow, transformative process of learning to tend, contain, and utilize a force of nature. Evolutionary biologists like Richard Wrangham propose a powerful theory known as the cooking hypothesis. They argue that the act of cooking food with fire fundamentally changed our bodies and our destiny. Raw meat and tough tubers require immense energy to chew and digest. Fire acted as a form of pre-digestion, breaking down fibers and neutralizing toxins, which made a vastly greater number of calories and nutrients available from the same amount of food. This energy windfall did more than just fill our stomachs, it literally fed our brains. The human brain is an incredibly greedy organ, consuming a massive portion of the body's energy. The new, efficient fuel from cooked food provided the caloric surplus necessary to support a dramatic expansion in brain size over hundreds of thousands of years. But the impact of the hearth extended far beyond biology. The campfire became the first social network, a fixed point of warmth and safety that allowed for larger, more stable communities to form. In the extended light and security of the flames, the pressure of constant vigilance eased. there was time not just for survival but for interaction. This is where language likely began to flourish, in the space between sunset and sleep, with faces illuminated by a shared glow. Stories were born here not as entertainment, but as vital tools for transmitting knowledge, cementing social bonds, and making sense of a mysterious world. So why would the very element responsible for our biological and social ascent not become the hero of our origin stories? The mastery of fire was the single greatest advantage our species ever gained. It was the difference between life and death, between a shivering existence and a thriving community. It is only natural that early humans, witnessing this transformative power every single day, would attribute their survival to a force that felt both benevolent and divine. Long before fire was a god in a myth, it was a sacred partner in the pragmatic business of living. The myth-making was an inevitable next step, a way to deify the very thing that had made us human. This evolutionary perspective reveals a stunning truth. The universality of fire in creation stories is not a cultural coincidence. It is a deep, ancestral memory burned into our collective psyche, a story written in the flames that built our brains and forged our communities. Even in the deep silence of sleep, the mind continues its ancient dance with flame. A dream of a house on fire can jolt you awake with a racing heart, while a vision of a warm, steady hearth can leave you with a profound sense of peace upon waking. Carl Jung and his followers saw these nocturnal visions not as random noise, but as a direct line to the subconscious, where fire acts as a powerful barometer for the inner self. A blazing inferno might symbolize a life situation feeling out of control, a purging of old ways, or even repressed anger threatening to consume everything. Conversely, the gentle, contained flame of a candle or a fireplace often represents the soul's own vital spark, a core of comfort, inspiration, or a new idea just beginning to kindle. This dream logic is deeply personal, yet it follows patterns so universal they feel like a shared language. Modern oneirology, the science of dreaming, has observed that reports of fire dreams noticeably increase during periods of significant life transition, such as a new career, the end of a relationship, or a move to a new city. In these moments of psychological upheaval, the subconscious mind reaches for the most potent symbol of transformation it knows, replaying the primordial cycle of destruction and renewal on a personal, intimate scale. It is a private myth-making where the old self must be burned away to make space for the new. Now consider the ancient myth-makers sitting by their fires after a night of potent dreams. They would look from the flickering embers to the star-filled sky, their minds swirling with images of celestial blazes and terrestrial eruptions that felt strangely familiar. It is not a great leap to suggest that they projected this powerful, internal dream imagery onto the cosmos to explain the external realities they could not otherwise understand. A volcanic explosion was not just geology, it was the Earth dreaming a nightmare of creation. The birth of a new star was the cosmos dreaming a spark of life into the void. The recurring fire in our oldest stories, then, is more than a clever metaphor. It is the collective dream of humanity made manifest, a shared subconscious understanding that all birth is preceded by a necessary and often terrifying heat. This is why these myths feel so intuitively true, even to us today. They do not just tell us how the world was made, they show us how we are continually remade, night after night, dream after dream, in the private theater of our own mind. The glow of a smartphone screen is our new campfire, a digital hearth where communities gather to share stories. We no longer speak of stealing embers from the sun, but we do talk about sparking innovation, igniting a movement, or burning through our to-do list. Our most advanced technologies are steeped in the language of flame. We call the vast server complexes that power our online world server farms. Yet what are they if not immense, humming forges of information, generating the heat of pure data. These digital fires demand immense energy, creating a literal heat that requires sophisticated cooling systems to prevent a meltdown. The metaphor is almost too perfect. We have externalized our cognitive fire, building silicon brains that learn and create, and we wrestle with the same Promethean dilemma our ancestors faced. Are we unleashing a benevolent tool or a force we cannot control? This is the new frontier for our oldest symbol. As climate change supercharges wildfires, turning forests into roaring infernos that reshape continents, we are witnessing the birth of potential new myths in real time. The ancient image of fire as a purifying, avenging force is being rekindled. Could these megafires become the Surtur of our age, a planetary response to ecological imbalance, a devastating reset that demands a new story of stewardship and respect for the natural world? Just as the Aztecs saw their world as a fragile creation requiring constant sacrifice, we may be developing a global narrative where our collective actions either feed or starve this vengeful blaze. Futurists gaze even further beyond our atmosphere. The first human settlement on Mars will be an event of unimaginable significance, a second Genesis. And what will be one of our first acts there in that sterile, red dust? We will kindle a flame, not just for practical survival in the sub-zero temperatures, but as a profound ritual. The lighting of the first hearth on an alien world will be a creation story in itself, a declaration that humanity has brought its primordial partner to a new cradle. This act will echo every myth we have ever told, from Grandmother Spider's stolen ember to the cosmic fireball of the Big Bang, but it will be ours. The stories we tell about that moment will define our future, framing our species not just as explorers, but as bearers of the sacred spark across the cosmos. Our relationship with fire is evolving from a partnership with nature to a dialogue with our own creations and a responsibility for our planet. The elemental force that once huddled us together against the dark now challenges us to think globally and interplanetarily. The stories are not ending, they are transforming, ensuring the eternal flame of myth will find new fuel for as long as we have new worlds to imagine, both digital and